Coach Roy Pittman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I just been researching you all morning, and there's so many things I want to ask you about. Let's just start though with a brief background on yourself. How did you end up in Portland and go into high school out there in the 60s?
Well, I was born in Louisiana, the state of champions, of course. But then we moved here when I was about 4 years old. My parents moved here and stayed here and been here ever since.
And did you wrestle in high school?
Yes, I did. Back in 1958.
Ooh.
Yes, those were the good days. Horsehair mats, long pants, stuff like that.
And then how did you end up founding the wrestling club at Peninsula Park in the 70s?
Well, I was a recreation director, a recreation specialist, and I had to come up with a program that everyone could do. And I looked around, and programs like football, you have to have special talents. Baseball, you have to have special talents. Basketball, all these other sports, you had to have special talents, but they all cut people. And two of the most traumatic things in a kid's life is being cut and being picked last. And wrestling sport where all it takes is just discipline and dedication.
Yeah, that's a big thing for you, inclusivity and getting kids to believe in themselves.
That's all it is. Throughout the years, everybody think that we're coaching wrestling, but what we're really coaching is kids.
Where do you think, just looking at it now, where do you think most clubs go away from kind of your core philosophy that you've seen? Is it just that the inclusivity isn't there?
Well, egos. A nation is only as strong as the youth in that nation. And we got to constantly build these youth. And in building these youth, it's all about believing. Peninsula is not about outcome, it's about output.
And did you have this philosophy from the very beginning?
Pretty much so, yes. Yes, I know.
So when you talk about kids coming in the club, I saw an interview you did, and you say that you redefine success and winning.
Yes.
What does that mean to you guys?
Well, many kids, they see people like Jordan Burroughs, Kenny Monday, or John Smith, and they try to emulate people. And that's one of the things that's wrong with our country today. We like to emulate other people, and all you can be is really yourself. And deal with what you have to deal with. Not, you could practice your whole life and never be as fast as Kenny Monday, or never be as flexible as John Smith. And so we have to redefine success for you. What's best for you?
And do you stray away from outcome-based definitions of success, like winning and losing?
Well, there is no loser if you do the best you can.
I like that.
Yeah, the key of all this is, do you believe in yourself? And the more you get into it, especially now, we all deal with trauma. And it just comes out differently.
And do you see a lot of the kids that you coach throughout the years, do they have some form of trauma in their life?
Oh, yes, everyone does. The biggest thing about trauma or about all these things, mental health, is everyone's in denial until it happens. We see it every day in professional athletes. We just look at their performance and look at their bodies, but we don't look at their behavior.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's you definitely see that, especially I was just watching a documentary earlier this week, and they talk about the post-Olympic blues and how these Olympic athletes, after the Olympics, it can be a really depressing time. And a lot of them never get back to that pinnacle.
Well, you look at it as, where are they now? Are they constructive members to society, or are they a drain on society?
Mm-hmm.
And my whole purpose is make them positive, contributing members to society within the culture that they choose to live in.
And you do that through wrestling. And if we go back to when you first started the club, you know, I don't know a lot about Oregon. Give us a sense of like the environment where Peninsula Park's at, and, you know, where did you guys first start, and like how many kids did you have? Talk about the early years.
Okay, the early years, Peninsula Park. Well, Oregon is the whitest state in the United States, and I started at Peninsula Park. It's in North Portland, and in North Portland is where a lot of kids of color was living, and so they. You know, they could run track and play baseball and football, but they weren't wrestling. So I said, I want to start something that everyone can do regardless. And so what I did is I started with Cub Scouts, because Cub Scouts had the mannerisms that I wanted. That was the foundation.
Mm.
And I started with 5 kids, and they went out, and they were the disciples, and they went out and recruited other kids, and people saw their behavior, and it just mushroomed from there.
And when you're at your peak of it, how many kids are you seeing come through there on a weekly basis?
Well, last night we had practice, and we had about 45 kids.
That's good this time of year. So, Coach, you're still in there. You're still in that practice.
Of course, man.
Wow.
Of course.
That's incredible. I saw several reports that say like you've coached over 60,000 kids in your day. Something crazy like that.
It's really more than that. But who's keeping count? It's probably close to 200,000 over 53 years.
53 years. And so, you know, I think about Portland. I think about some of the stuff you've heard in the news in the past 3 to 4 years. But back in the 80s, you know, I just did a documentary on a legendary wrestler from Illinois, Tony Davis, and you know, the crack epidemic hit Chicago really bad in the 80s. Did you see that in North Portland back in the 80s in the gang environments? Oh, yes, we did. You know, with your clubs, you have to have an environment where everyone is welcome. Mm-hmm. Our country, our system is great in labeling things. And the reason we label things is because once you label something, you don't have to know what's inside. You just look at the label. Mm-hmm. And many of the people are labeled because of their color, because of their height, because of different things. And you really never get to see that real person. Yeah. And that's really what you're about is trying to change that perspective. And if you look at the actual wrestling of it, like, do you guys start with, you know, like the 4-year-olds, they do a certain technique and the older kids do different techniques? How do you structure that? Because I know one of your things is how big the age gap is in the room. Wrestling is simple. Wrestling is all about 8 basic skills. And it's been that way since the beginning of time, and how you as an individual adjust your body to those skills. That's all. You know, but when we start comparing kids and going into other areas, you know, you can look at Jordan Burroughs' example. You know, he has the motion, the change of elevation, the explosion. He has all. When he puts those skills together, he's unbeatable. Mm-hmm. But when he loses, it's because he's dropped one of those skills. It's not because the person was better than him. He just dropped one of those skills. And what are the eight skills in your eyes? Well, it's position, it's motion, it's changing elevation, back step, back arch, lift, and hand fighting. Wow, that's simple. Yes, it's just certain kids, like a kid will come in, a 4-year-old, mm-hmm. and every parent think their kid is the greatest kid in the world, but the kid can't tie his shoe. So we talk about that.
So I get a relationship with the parents, and regardless what anyone says, no parent can be objective with their own child. And that's why they need someone else to guide them. And it's who do they pick to guide that child? And I act as a guide for most of these kids and the parents. Some kids come from single parents, some kids don't. But I'm consistent. I am here. I'm the one consistent things in people's lives. I'm here.
Wow. And how long throughout the year are you guys going?
We go year round.
I love it, man. This is, I can't believe, I was in wrestling for so long, and just in the past 3 to 5 years, started hearing about the club. And it's like, man, it's such an awesome thing to see this. And like, man, the Oregon history is so rich too. You go back to those Portland State teams of the early 90s, and, Dan Russell's Penn and Pat Smith at the Portland State duel. I mean, there were some great names during that era.
Well, see, we used to have a competition here. Well, people thought it was a competition, but we had two main clubs, USA Oregon and Peninsula.
The Cobras, right?
Huh?
The Cobras.
Yes.
Okay,
and the only difference was the philosophy. But USA Oregon started with Peninsula.
So 1970, you start 1970, you start Peninsula Park. 1972, Mark Sprague starts the Cobras. And what happened during those years, and what's the difference between the programs?
Well, the difference is I wanted all means all. And Mark was interested in his son. And Marky Sprague was one of the toughest things going. But after he got when he started out, he couldn't chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. But once he got those basic fundamentals down, and Mark had him on the program, he was tougher than snot. So Mark wanted to fast track him to the Olympics. And I said, Mark, everyone can't do that. So he said, after a couple of years, he said, well, I'll go out on my own. And so we split, but we still remain friends. And we use that as a conduit to make Oregon great. Because once we left Oregon, we would join together as one. And that just made us tougher than crap.
At Fargo or Junior Nationals? Yes. Yeah.
At Fargo, anywhere.
But when you're within Oregon, though, I've heard that the rivalry is legit between the two clubs.
Oh, yes, it is. It's just, we're just different. He takes pride in his young men. I take pride in mine. And, he likes to win. I like output. And I wait for the development of kids, and also wait to see, what will it be like as an adult.
And what was so their philosophy was more of like a private club, like a paid academy?
It was a club, private club. And we would just get kids, like I'd go out in the park, I'd see kids in the park and say, hey, how'd you like to wrestle? And I'd go get them and bring them in the park, bring them in, and we start wrestling. And just start working at stuff like that. And I says, how good do you want to be? It's not how good that I want to make you. How good remember Travis West?
Oh yeah. Let's get into some of these guys. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Travis West, and he had about 8 brothers.
Man, I read one of the most troubling stories I've ever heard this morning about his older brother, Lorenzo West, University of Oregon. The whole wrestling team van got into a horrible crash.
Yes, they did.
Oh my
God. On that team, Lorenzo was just coming into his own. I also had a young man on there named Larry Toplift, who was a freshman. He was just coming in on his own. And Lorenzo, he got killed, but Larry got paralyzed.
And was there other team members in the van?
Yes.
Wow, man, that is.
It was a tragic accident, and it changed transportation here in Oregon, because people had to have better transportation and going to these wrestling meets.
And so Travis was in middle school when this was all happening, and then he talk about his wrestling style.
He had what I call hips from hell. And he could toss anyone. And he was stubborn. And he was the baby of the family. And so he was spoiled. I was like a father figure to him. And what I do is I give every kid a new friend. And that friend is called Pat. And Pat is pain, agony, and torture with a positive attitude today. And so you got to get to Pat.
Man, there's so much just one-liners in this that I can't wait to go back and listen to. So what is it again? Pain, agony?
Pain, agony, and torture with a positive attitude today. Chael knows about that.
Let's go.
You know, Chael was a jokester. He was tough, but he was a jokester. He came along at a great time. And he's a historian.
He is a historian. Now, he tells a story of one time when Clyde the Glide was playing for Portland and Jordan's in town, and you had tickets to the game, and you were in front of practice, and you said, "Who wants these tickets?" And a bunch of hands go up, and then you say, "Well, the game starts at 5:30, and we have practice until whatever time," and you rip the tickets up in front of the room. Is that true?
Yeah. I don't go see someone else do their expertise and miss out on mine. And I just wanted to show kids it's about sacrifice. I never have and never will.
Wow. Like Jordan's not going to miss practice, right? So
no, he's not going to miss practice to come and see me. So why should I go see him?
So when Chael comes in the room, give us like the sense of the era, like who's in the room and like what's the vibe when he comes in?
Well, right now they see him because he's on television and stuff. And people, they see this person on television, but that's not the real Chael. Chael is a loving, caring person. And he's very loyal. And one of the things about Chael is he knows how to finish. Whatever he starts, he finishes. And he's an entertainer now. He's an entertainer. He can make you hate him, but if you really know him, you'll love him because you know that's just an act.
And he was like that on the bus rides back in the day, joking and.
Well, he would have to wait his turn. We'd have guys like Bobby Janice. Bobby Janice was a little kid that went to Arizona State and had a tragic accident.
I've read so much about him, and I can't wait to get into his story because just the wrestling I hear is unbelievable. Like one of the most gifted wrestlers and ever come through Oregon.
Oh, he was tough. He was a little kid, and I remember when he first started, he smelled like baby powder. And he'd get out there and he'd wrestle and he'd cry. And I says, "Man, if you don't like this, don't lose." And he didn't after that. And he just started just putting in the time and just working hard. I remember we were at the Nationals and Sam Henson and TJ Jaworski, he had to wrestle them and he was afraid to wrestle them. And I just walked up to him and says, "Well, why don't you win?" And he said, "Okay." And so he goes out there and he does a great job with them and he's very successful. But he always smelled like baby powder. That's what I always remember of him.
But a kid that good, even that good, he's still afraid before big matches.
Yes.
It's probably more common than we think, right, with all wrestlers.
But everyone is. They just, once again, they just hide it. That's just their way of dealing with it. Kids today, especially, they think that they have to win in order for their parents to like them. And I make them aware of, I could care less about the outcome of this match. I care about you as an individual. Did you do your best? Period. And it's not in what I say to them, it's my body language. When Chael and like after every practice, I give a speech to the kids about what did you do today? Did you do your best? What we need to work on. And I do it in such a way that I'm looking at one kid, but everyone thinks I'm looking at them. And they take it personal because they have that personal attention. And we shake hands coming in, look in my eyes, shake my hand when we come in. And when they leave, I give them an apple and shake their hand, and they got it back.
An apple?
Yes, an apple a day.
You must go through a lot of apples.
I go through about a box a night almost.
So when Bobby Janice comes in the room for the first time, I read that he was like 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
When did he start to make the switch where you're realizing this could be a once in a generation type of a talent?
I didn't realize it because there were guys in there that were just as good as he was. You got Bobby Janice, you had T-Von Abel, you had Damon McPherson, Chael, those guys that just had that left, Chael and Kevin Keeney, those guys that just left.
Mm-hmm.
High Brown. High Brown was like Bobby's little brother because they lived across the street from each other. High was pretty good himself, but he always wanted to quit. But Bobby was just, he was special. He was special.
What was his style like?
He was a scrambler. You couldn't get a takedown on him. He was a defensive wrestler that all of a sudden his defense was his offense. And all of these guys, they were never out of shape. Physically or mentally.
So when you're getting ready for like Fargo during those years, that was like the 80s. Are you guys working out? You're working out every day, but are you doing a lot of strength and conditioning, or do you mostly focus on the wrestling with guys back then?
Mental toughness. Toughness beats technique every time. You can have all the technique in the world, but if someone's kicking your butt, hey, and if you look at all these young people that are wrestling now, they're just tough.
Yeah.
And that's what our kids don't have today, for one reason or another.
You noticed that?
Oh, immensely.
When did you start seeing it? Like 10 years ago or like 5 years ago?
About 15 years ago.
Pains me to hear that.
Kids to be tough.
Yeah.
Because their parents, we have a rule in our country, no fighting. And that's all we're doing out there. I said, hey, we're going to win this fight, man. We're predator or prey. Come on, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
You decide. And then they had to deal with Pat and then deal with those emotions and the feelings. And it goes from there. Wow.
And so if we, man, I can't even imagine some of the scraps you've seen inside the room. And one of the, while we're on the topic of Bobby Janice, one of the matchups I've been told to ask you about is if you had to pit the great Oscar Wood versus Bobby Janice, can you even pontificate how that match would go?
Bobby would win. Like if Bobby was special. He was awesome. So was Oscar. Oscar, Isaac, they were all good as well. But Bobby was a special one. He would beat, like he and Gutches, they were on the world team together. And they both took what? I think Bobby took 4th or 5th when they went on that world team. Wow. And they come to Fargo and they win Fargo, then go home.
Double champ. That's and back then there was only, I think there was really only just the one division. So to win it all was like you were the one guy. And so to be a double champ back then was crazy.
It was crazy. I mean, your body was beat up, your mind was beat up, but this is what we worked for. This is what we wanted. We loved it hot. It's, what is it? Iron sharpens iron.
Right. And, I know these guys weren't in your club, but Oregon legends, Dan Russell, the high school wrestler, what was he like back in the day?
He was like poetry in motion. He had that chin whip. at front headlock. And everyone said, well, you got to shoot in college. And he says, no, I don't. And he went through almost his whole career and turned everyone with that headlock. Wow. He was awesome, and he was always a gentleman, still is today. All of those guys, it was always about respect. That whole generation was about respect. And it's always, when I see him now, it's Coach Pittman, Mr. Pittman, how you're doing? That's what it's about. We're all grown-ups now.
Yeah. There's just so many storylines out there during that time. I did a documentary on the Smith brothers, and of course, Pat Smith's first match, like we already talked about, they go to Oklahoma State, flies to Portland State, yes. And first match out of redshirt, I think it was a pin. I don't know if it's a tech or a pin. I think it was a pin. John Smith's the coach. Pat Smith gets pinned, and of course, Dan Russell is the first 4-time Division II champ ever. Or Tim Wright might have been before him, but right around that area. So it's like, man, a lot of great wrestling out in that era.
Well, it was just, we had the coaching. Everything's about coaching and about development, and it was development of kids. Right now, it's every parent or every person thinks they can coach. And they hurt more kids than they help, because they don't have the patience to wait, or they don't want to get those 8 basic skills down. They look for instant gratification.
So were the parents not involved as much back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s?
Well, some of the parents were. A lot of the kids that I had, I was the parent. The parents, they didn't go to matches and stuff. They weren't used to wrestling, but hey, that was okay. But they knew their kids were okay because they were with me, and I gave them something to do on Saturdays and on the weekends and stuff like that.
And so are you guys going every weekend to a tournament somewhere?
Every weekend. Every weekend.
And how did you develop a propensity for Greco? Seems like a lot of your guys have gone on to have a lot of Greco success.
Pavo came to the United States. Mark Sprague brought Pavo into the United States. And he was working at USA Oregon. And because of the rivalry that we had, sometimes he would come over to Peninsula. And he liked Peninsula because our guys were so tough. He loved toughness. And so all I would tell guys, the way I used to coach Greco is I tell guys, don't touch the legs. But they had those basic fundamentals down so pat that they didn't have to touch the legs.
Now, I'm embarrassed to say, I don't know who Pavel is.
Oh, Pavel, he coached for the U.S. Olympic team way back in the early days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Greco.
I think he's in New York now, coaching someplace out of New York. He came from Russia.
So he's out there, and you guys really develop all styles of wrestling, but definitely Greco. Yeah. And one of the guys who I saw, is it Romeo Salas?
Romilio Salas, yes.
How did he come across your radar?
He came from Columbia, and he was at Pacific University out here. And whether we like it or not, color plays a difference in a lot of things that we do. And these kids they've never seen a black coach before. And so they gravitated to me because the way I treated them, and we was a novelty. When these kids go to tournaments, people have no idea what they have to go through.
How do you mean?
Well, people treat them differently. Even myself, when I used to go to tournaments, and even now, sometimes you go to restaurants, they won't serve you. Stuff like that. Call your names. You can have, say, 200 kids out there playing around, and people will tell you, get your kids under control. And I said, well, Why do I have to get the rest of them under control? And I always have the kids show respect, and I always have to say that I'll take care of it, or it's not what people call you, but what you answer to. So just don't answer to those things.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's frustrating for you, and you have to, keep it together to be an example for the kids.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. I accepted this responsibility of being a role model for all kids, and that all, it does mean all.
So
because
did you always?
A lot of,
go ahead. Sorry.
a lot of white kids, they have problems too. They just handle them differently.
Mm-hmm. I like how you're keying in on that. All kids have some issues going on that we don't probably know about on the outside. Like you said, whether it's trauma or whatever. Like I haven't really heard that a lot.
Well, it is. That's trauma makes the decision for many of these young people today. Trauma and shame. And a lot of people are ashamed to say, hey, like if I asked you, what time do you eat dinner at night? You will probably say around 6:30. Some kids don't have dinner, but they're ashamed to say it.
Yeah.
It's like when you come to school, come back from spring break or spring vacation, and the teacher asks kids, well, where'd you go on spring break? Other kids, well, we went to Disneyland, we went here. And then they ask a kid that goes nowhere, what's he going to say? What's she going to say?
Right.
They're going to lie.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And just subtle things like that you don't even think about,
Yeah, that's what makes a person. And that says, don't be ashamed. So I give them something to do, give them skills to deal with the questions that they have to answer within their peer group.
Yeah. And you have such a knack for breaking down these complex subjects and distilling them to kids. What did you do before you were involved as a wrestling coach? Did you go right into it, or did you have a career before being a wrestling coach at Peninsula Park?
Went right into it. Because all sports have the same basic skills.
Yeah.
Quickness, everyone's the same. It's just we handle it differently.
But did you know you wanted to coach, or like when you were coming up through high school or in college?
No. No, no one knows what they want to do because no one knows what tomorrow might bring. So what we do is we get kids to lie. Well, I want to do this, I want to do that. You don't know what you want to do. Situations and circumstances may arise for you to do something totally different. And with in the 80s, and especially now, they've got these young people doing all this shooting and things. But is anyone talking about the kids and how they're dealing with it? And it's their friends, and that's where trauma and grief and all that stuff comes in. And we're worried about winning a match? Come on, man. Come on.
Right. Yeah. No, it's like you see stuff like that, it puts it all into perspective.
It is. We go to Fargo every year, and I've been telling Fargo for the longest, we've got, like last year, there were 7,000 kids here. 7,000 kids from all over the United States, and we don't have nothing educational for them.
Interesting. Yeah. You got the singlet trading going on outside, but like there's so much dead time. Those kids could be doing something.
Can you imagine if we taught these kids how to treat young ladies, or taught all of the juniors and seniors how to get recruited? Just little things like that will help them. Certain behaviors that you have to have on, in college or in life, how to change your life, how to pick friends. Just
basic life skills like that.
That's all it is.
Wow.
Because they come from everywhere, all over. You talk about trading singlets out there. You got guys that just come in to trade singlets that take advantage of all these kids.
Right.
And they make thousands of dollars.
So how many years have you been going to the junior nationals for? Every year?
Every year. Oh, I missed 1 year due to
my.
COVID.
That's it though. Besides the COVID year? Wow.
Once again, it's consistency. First I went as a coach, now I go as an official.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you were involved with the 1984 team, what was that involvement? The Olympic team.
I was a coach for the Colombian team.
Got it. Okay.
Emilio Salas, yes.
So you coached him just after he got to college, or how did you start working with him?
Yes, after college. Nice. See, my room is open to everyone. It's places like right now, Clackamas Community College, all these colleges around. If their guys want extra practice, they come to the room.
Wow. So you have young kids in there with the older kids and.
Oh yeah. Remember Tyrell Fortune?
I don't know that name.
You know, he does MMA now, but he was six-time national champion at Fargo at 220.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you've been big on having, anyone come to your room, including girls. Like, how long have you had women coming through the program?
Oh, they've been there ever since the beginning.
Really?
Yeah. We had them. As a matter of fact, we had this one girl named, I think it was Sammy, and we had to have a lawyer on retainer because the way she was being treated by other people.
Like from other teammates or not? I mean, not other teammates, but other teams, or like what?
Other teams, they wouldn't treat her as an individual. Like, she'd have to have a special place to change. Right. No, you can't do that. No, they're not. And they'd stack the deck against her.
Like just put her up against hammers right away.
Yeah. And I said, well, when this happens, you let me know, and we'll send them a letter, and we'll make it happen.
When was this?
And now, I think now there's over 20,000 girls wrestling.
Yeah. And when the stories you were saying, when was that taking place? Would you say?
About the 80s, early 80s.
So it's like those early pioneers, they went through a lot. They just took it on the chin.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And now they're adults now, and they're better for it. But once again, it wasn't about winning. It was just about getting through this time in your life, where you get what wrestling gives you, that mental toughness.
Mm-hmm.
People like wrestlers because wrestlers don't quit.
It's true. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the great people who have come through your program, I know, people like me and, others, we'll talk about the names that we all remembered. I know there's millions of names that that have came through that are amazing wrestlers that we never heard of. But one that does come to mind, Kelsey Campbell.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about her progression.
She came through. She was going to Milwaukee High School. And when she first went to Milwaukee High School to wrestle, they thought she was a custodian. And they thought she was there just to mop the mats. And a lot of people, they come to Peninsula because the atmosphere at Peninsula is, we welcome anyone and everyone. And so she came there and she started her journey. The philosophy at Peninsula, first year you learn how to lose. Next year you learn how to win. And next year you learn how to be a good person. And winning isn't winning the match, but winning is doing the best you can with what you have. But she would get beat up every day and come back the next day ready to go. And she was in there with those guys, and those guys, they didn't spare their horses with her. She wanted to wrestle, and they would wrestle. And she got tougher and tougher. Like, success for her was just getting a takedown on some of the guys in there.
Mm-hmm. And were you there when she made the team in 2012?
Yes, I was.
Wow, that had to be That had to be a special moment. How many Olympians and Olympic alternates have you coached over the years?
5.
Who are they? You got
Anthony
Kelsey.
Amado, Remilio Salas, Travis West, and who the other two? Yeah, West and Kelsey.
Kelsey, yeah.
Kelsey made it twice.
Yeah. And there's a name that Chael mentioned that I have to ask about. Is it Broderick Lee?
Oh, yes. Broderick, we used to call him Force Half Lee. Broderick was he used to wrestle with Dennis. Remember Dennis Hall?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They used to have barn burners. He's the only one that beat Broderick. He beat him at the Nationals in Fargo, and also he beat him for the Olympic trials.
Wow.
But Fargo was this little bow-legged kid, but he was very likable. And he was tough. He was tough. And they all went to Portland State. And we had a pipeline to Portland State. And that's when Portland State, they went on, and with Marlon, they went and won the national championships 2 years in a row with 5 kids.
5 in the finals.
And they all were national champions.
Ooh,
Broderick,
crazy.
Broderick, Russell, Sisson, Travis, and Tony Champion.
Wow. What a name, Tony Champion.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what Tony Champion, that's a hell of a name.
Yeah.
So Broderick Lee, he's part of this. So this era of guys where you guys are putting a lot of guys out at Fargo. I mean, what was his style like? Was he more of a thrower guy?
Yeah, he was a ruffian. He would beat you up. he was like a bully, 120-pound bully. Bow legs, muscle bound guy. He looked like a wrestler's ears would stick out.
Man,
he could really turn it on. And all these guys can throw, because that's one of the basic skills that you have to have. So you wrestle them, and next thing you know, bam.
Right. And do you think have you seen like a de-emphasis on Greco over the past 30, 40 years? Like at the youth and national level?
Well, what happens, all these shirts that you see with Greco, it's always someone throwing someone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a mother, you don't want your child to be on that shirt being thrown.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to change that logo, because wrestling is Greco is not about throwing. It's all about position and just toughness.
Yeah, and
it's
just such a hand fighting game.
Yeah, they always want to throw. And how many times do you see a thrower in Greco up in the upper division? Not that much.
Right.
Yeah, but you see a lot of pushing out of bounds, a lot of strategy. There's a lot of mental toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And all these matches are won by 1 or 2 points, not by 5 or 6. And everybody gets impatient. And when they make that mistake, that good guy, he makes them pay for it.
Now, were the Cobra guys doing a lot of Greco as well? Because I think about Oscar, yes. They were big on it too, huh?
With Pablo there, they did a lot. Have you heard of Anthony Amado?
Just through Chael.
Oh yeah, Anthony Amado. He was another Olympian here, and he's still around. He's tough.
And all through a little park district club. Like, you're not going out and recruiting kids. You're not like, this is just people who live in the area, basically.
Yeah, that's safe. You come in, I see you in the park, or people who come because they see us at tournaments and they want to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you always have to be a gentleman. I don't yell and scream and degrade and all that other stuff. You don't need to do all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You treat them like human beings.
Yeah, I mean, and like a couple of things I've read about you. It's just like one of your things is just being nice.
Yeah,
that's simple.
Hey, it's the most simple thing in the world. Be nice, be nice, be nice. And that's why that simple handshake at the beginning of practice, it teaches young people how to look people in the eye and shake their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks down a lot of barriers.
It's a lost skill too, from what I'm hearing.
Well, yes, it is. With COVID and all that other stuff.
Right.
But these are things we have to get back to. It's, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. And when you think about all these values you're instilling in kids, I think about how much influence you must have on where a lot of your guys go to college. What was that process like, seeing some of your studs get recruited by the big time colleges? Were you pretty involved with that, or?
What I do is I give everyone a sheet on how to select a college, or what I think is how to select a college. And like the first one is, what type of weather do you like? Because you're going to be there for 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. Make them aware of the college doesn't make you, you make the college. Mm-hmm. And it's, what do you want to do? And when you go to college, you can only there's 3 things that you can do. You can do your sport, you can do your studies, or you can have girls. But there's 3 things you can do, but you can only do 2 of them well. So it's, what 2 are you going to do?
Now, do you think the coach of the college matters a lot? And it sounds obvious, of course it does, but a lot of times coaches come and go. It's like, how much weight do you put on the coach at the time of the program?
It's all on the kid and their style and who they are. Mm-hmm. They just have to feel comfortable. And what are they going to school for? I've got guys that'll practice and don't want to go to college, don't want to wrestle in college, but they'll go to college and they'll graduate and do well.
Right.
But they don't want to wrestle in college. And I said, fine. So see, everything depends on you. It's how much you want to put into it. Mm-hmm. That's all.
And outside of Portland State, would you say Arizona State was the second biggest pipeline for you guys? Did you send a lot of guys there, or just a couple?
Well, Arizona State, Northwestern, had some at Harvard or Stanford.
Wow.
It's all over. Wherever they want to go. I try to stay out of it because their parents always say, well, I got it. I got this. They all think they know. And I said, fine, go.
Wow.
But you can always come back because the door swings both ways.
I'd love to see Oregon have a program again.
I think they will. It's just how we handle it. Right now it's all political. Mm-hmm.
I could see coming back strong with a men and a women's program. I mean, that's the only way, to have a standalone women's program is a must. But man, Oregon State's in good hands with Chris Pendleton and those guys right now. I like those guys a lot.
Well, they did a fabulous job. They got the market cornered.
Yeah.
Out here.
Yeah.
There's only one D1 school in the state.
And no D1 schools in Washington.
None. And so what we have to do is we all have to work together. And everybody thinks, well, I want to go back here. I want to go back there. Hey, education is what you have left when you've forgotten everything you've learned. So you can get an education anywhere. You have to have an educational degree, but you also have to have a street degree. That's what makes Chael so special. He's got a street degree along with the educational degree.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Man, he's funny. He's just a great advocate for wrestling. It's awesome.
See, we need him, and because wrestling is a political thing.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
And these females, they saved our sport, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And so now the iron is hot, is we need to talk to legislators about what's good for our sport. And I think we're the 5th largest participating sport in NC2As.
Yeah. I'm with you on the tracks of women's wrestling savings men's college wrestling, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these are all daughters of these congressmen, statesmen, and businessmen, and what have you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's looking good though right now. I like where things are at, and there's every day you hear of more programs being added, mostly at like the Division III level. But we dodged a bullet with Stanford, and hopefully we get some more programs going back out west where you guys are at.
Oh yes, I do too. It's everyone needs someplace to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest mistake we had here on the West Coast is California used to give kids from junior colleges free tuition.
Right.
And then some person with their infinite wisdom starts saying, well, let's not do that anymore. Let's start charging them. And everything went down from there.
Yeah.
Because everyone follows California, New York.
That California JUCO season is so unique where they do it in the fall. They're doing it right now, right?
Yes.
And it's just like their own JUCO, like 28 or 22 schools, and they don't even compete in the NJCAs.
No, well, they got so many people.
Beautiful
they got so
thing.
many people down there, with so much money and just different ideas.
Yeah.
I had a young man go down there, Norman Richmond, and he went down there and he was a JUCO champion. He went down there for 2 years and did a good job.
Yeah.
And now Peninsula is ran by volunteers. So it's not about money.
Wow.
And they're all coming back, volunteering, helping these young people. Because I always make them aware of where they came from. And with that all means all, what I did for one, I'll do for every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to understand that.
It's cool how you can make each one feel like you have a unique connection with them, but really you're doing that with all of them.
Yes. You treat everyone the same, differently.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a lot of awareness on your part of where these kids are coming from and realizing that they all have to go home. And when they go home, they're not going to let you take away one of their survival skills or techniques.
And have you ever had any of the kids have to live with you because their environment was so unstable at home, or?
No, I don't have them live with me. I have them live with other parents.
Okay.
Other parents, they've adopted some kids and done these other things, but I keep that away.
Gotcha.
To keep, just for safety.
Yeah. And when you look at, we're coming down to the end here, Coach. It's been awesome to chat with you. And you look at, the message you're sending out to the kids. It's very unique. And every interview we wind down with the question, how did wrestling change your life? That's the name of the podcast. So like when you look at some of the lessons that wrestling's taught you or that you're giving out to the kids, what are the big ones?
Well, one, it's not what you've lost, but what you have left. And it's how you apply that. And what wrestling has done for me, this past January, I lost 2 brothers, a niece, and a daughter. And when I lost my daughter, I lost her at 7:00 p.m. and I was at practice at 8:00.
What? Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry for you. That's a horrible situation, but you still went to practice.
You had to. These young people, when they count on you, they count on you. And that's what it's about.
Wow.
And that's why, I talk about trauma and all this other stuff. We need mental health people at all of our programs because kids deal with this every day and they just have to find the words to say.
Right.
And I give them a word to say and I let them know that, hey, I'm here, but I'm hurting. This is something that you can do. You can get through it. It won't last. And if they see you go through it, then they feel like they can do it.
Yeah. And when you look at, going back to the topic we were talking about earlier, one of your wrestlers, Bobby Janice, he was, on track to be a star and, fortunately took his life as a freshman at Arizona State. When you see something like that, was that like an eye-opening moment for you, or were you kind of aware of this all going on before this?
Well, I was down in Arizona that Friday night before that happened. and we had dinner Friday night, and he told me he was going to come back and go to Portland State because his mom was going to have some type of surgery. And it just makes you aware that any given moment, something might happen. What shows the importance of gangs. Gangs were very relevant then. And these kids will do anything to belong to something.
Mm-hmm.
And he got involved and made a mistake, but it just took his life.
And so you had dinner with him on Friday.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this happened Saturday.
And what time of year was this?
This was around September and October. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that is just something you don't even think about until it happens. And
no, you don't. You don't. It was a tough pill to swallow. A tough pill to swallow. But once again, you got to go through it. You got to go through it. And if I can make it easier for other kids, showing them how to go through this, because this is life.
And what advice would you have for anyone who's going through some tough stuff right now, like to get through like a traumatic event like that? What's the first thing you tell them?
Find the words to say. Tell someone, talk to someone. That's the most important thing. And we have to be accessible to these kids and knowing that they are going through a lot of things in their life. And it's more than just wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Wrestling is just a conduit for something. But these kids, they want to belong and they're going to belong.
It's
and
like,
right
can we
now,
just get them in the right group though, right? Like what group are they going to belong to? Otherwise, that's the...
Exactly. And there's so much fake news out there that they got to process all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kids today you have access to kids today 24 hours a day. That's too much. There's no downtime.
It's exhausting.
Yes, it is. And we want them to perform and do all these other things. So I teach them how to relax, just how to meditate. Just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And not be afraid to show emotions.
That's a big one.
Oh my gosh. Especially with boys. Well, even with girls now, because, they want to be tough as well. And everything can be taken out of context, depends on the culture that you come from.
Mm-hmm.
We tell kids about a lot of immigrants coming to the United States. But then you look at it, we're all immigrants here, except the Native Americans, man.
Mm-hmm.
And kids see that, so they get mixed messages unless you start breaking it down to them.
Yeah.
So, but that's what I love to do. And I, like I said before, a nation is only as strong as the youth in that nation. And I believe that concept so much that I've devoted 53 years for it.
And I'm so glad that you're out there on the mat still, because man, I just know that whole area of Portland's in good hands if you're controlling the stick. So it's been a long time coming. I'm so glad we're able to chat today, Coach. Any last words before we sign off, Coach Pittman?
Have a fabulous life. Have a great day. Okay.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it. You as well, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Take care.